Welcome to Marketing MKT210. I am Andre Walton and I will be your instructor for the course. I'm a social psychologist and also a marketing consultant. So what exactly is a social psychologist? Not only are we the ones who taught the psychologists how to party, we look at human psychology in the context of the group. In other words, we do not focus only on individuals' psychological factors when looking at behavior and motivation. We look at the context in which these behaviors and motivations occur. What this means to you is that I'll not just be considering marketing practices during this course. I'll also be looking under the hood to find out what makes some marketing material more successful than others, or why apparently subtle changes in a marketing strategy can have disproportionately significant impact on its success. I'll give you just one example of a social psychological view of marketing. If you take a look at the last 10 Super Bowl ads, and you can find these on YouTube, of course, you can find anything on YouTube, you will find that 9 out of the 10 use humor as their primary means of grabbing your attention. I chose Super Bowl ads because at some $5 million for a 30-second slot, you can bet there is a lot of resources poured into optimizing the content. So why humor? Many in the advertising world resisted using humor on the basis that no one will take the product seriously if you encourage them to laugh at it. The vast majority of women report that the thing that attracted them to their ultimate mate was the fact that they made them laugh. What is it about humor? Well, the answer is found under the hood. A psychologically healthy person will tend to find it a lot easier to recall memories that are associated with positive mood or happy events. In other words, that stroll along the beach watching a sunset will come to mind much more readily than being stuck in the traffic jam on the way to that beach. So whether it's a jazzy, upbeat party music playing behind a TV ad for a new diabetes drug, or Super Bowl ads using humor, associating one's product or service with something mood-enhancing, like humor or upbeat music, will tend to make it easier to recall that product at a later date. This is the kind of thing that social psychologists look at when studying marketing. Indeed, you'll be reading a few chapters from a book by one of the most eminent and knowledgeable gurus on the subject of persuasion, Dr. Robert Cialdini. His books and research have led to considerable advances in understanding how people make decisions and what influences them in that process. And marketing has always been a dynamic profession. Until a couple of decades ago, that dynamism was largely product-driven. In other words, exciting new products and services demanded exciting new marketing materials. So to that extent, it has always been one of the creative professions. However, since the beginning of this century, marketing has been turned on its head. And what has emerged is even more dynamic than in earlier times. That's one of the things that makes this such an exciting and interesting topic. When talking about early tribes, anthropologists refer to BCE, in other words, before the Christian epoch. When talking about marketing, I like to refer to BIE, before the internet epoch. The advent of the web, email, social media, YouTube, all these have totally changed how we plan and execute a marketing strategy. So let's just have a quick look at what marketing is, how it's defined. Well, these folks are pretty knowledgeable. They have been writing textbooks on marketing for quite a long time, and they have a definition which is pretty simple. They talk about marketing briefly for a couple of paragraphs before they get to this. They cite Peter Drucker, who is one of the world's sort of business gurus with particular emphasis on marketing. The aim of marketing is to make selling unnecessary, he says. What they come around to, though, is broadly defined, marketing is a social and managerial process by which individuals and organizations obtain what they need and want through creating and exchanging value with others. So they get down to saying, hence we define marketing as the process by which companies engage customers, build strong customer relationships, and create customer value in order to capture value from customers in return. So that's their take on the marketing, the definition of marketing. Now, one of the things that is important about the changes that we've just briefly discussed in terms of the new means of communication that we have is that this has put a different emphasis really on how we go about establishing that relationship with a prospective customer or indeed an existing customer. If you are able to cast your minds back a few decades, you will find that marketing is largely related to, or part of it is related to selling, perhaps a sales force, maybe that kind of thing. Part of it is related to print media advertising. Part of it is related to advertising maybe on the TV, maybe on the radio, maybe on the billboards that you drive past on the freeway. Now, just focusing on the billboard for the moment, I mean, this is totally unselective in terms of everybody driving past there. Okay, you can assume they have a driver's license, but really you can't tell much else about them. Anything to do with their demographic, anything to do with their education level, what they do at the weekends, how much they earn, all the rest of it. All those kinds of demographics. We don't know anything about that. We just put the billboard up and see if it works. And not only that, but it is a single direction of communication. This is not a bi-directional process. You put a message up on the billboard and you hope that people will understand from looking at that what you intended them to understand. And in general, that is true of all the BIE forms of promotion. I mean, not all exactly all, but in general, the vast majority. So you put an ad on the TV, and you can select sort of what programs it goes next to or in between. You can select the channel that it's on, but what you're still doing is to send out a message and hope that the message is interpreted the way you want it to be. Equally true, of course, for print media advertising, newspapers, magazines, that kind of thing. Now, what has changed in all this is that we have come into an era where our establishing a relationship with a potential customer or existing customer is a little bit different. Specifically, what we're looking at here is starting a conversation. That's the critical part of this process that has changed. And the process of doing that will be to, in some way, obtain information about your prospective customers. That means you have to know who they are. So one of the things we'll be talking about in this class is developing an avatar. Now, you won't find an avatar mentioned in this book. You won't find it mentioned in very many marketing books. It's a very contemporary concept, and it's one that is used in practice a lot, but somehow it hasn't crept into academia yet. What is an avatar? Well, an avatar is your prototypical potential or existing customer. In other words, just as an avatar in your, if you're playing a computer game, is an image, an icon, by which you wish to represent yourself in that game. So an avatar in the marketing sense is we're going to develop this mythical person or people, and that person is has characteristics that we believe match the characteristics of people who are going to buy our product or service. Now, there may be many different avatars. For instance, when Samsung are marketing their refrigerators, they may well have a specific type of refrigerator that they are going to sell to your grandma. On the other hand, the one that you aspire to buying once you manage to nail that highly paying marketing job, of course, might be the refrigerator with the freezer section in a drawer at the bottom. You don't mind bending down, whereas your grandma may not be so keen on that. It may be the refrigerator with the smart screen on it that will text your smartphone when you're running a bit lower on tequila mix. So anyway, you can see the idea. There may be different avatars for different parts of a product range or even the same product. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a considerable amount of flesh around the skeleton of this avatar. We're going to be really discussing what kinds of ways they communicate with their friends. We're going to be discussing what their disposable income looks like, how many kids they're most likely to have, and that kind of thing. And the more precision we can put to that avatar, the more successful our marketing practices are going to be. If you just imagine for a moment, you're sitting there, perhaps having a cup of coffee with your buddies, and somebody comes up and starts talking to you about why you should buy funeral insurance. And he lasts for a few minutes and realizes that all he's getting is crickets. He wanders off. And then you and your buddies stare at each other and say, what is this guy doing? Why is he wasting his time? Right? And what's the problem? I mean, why did he not capture your interest? Well, because you've got many decades to go before you have any interest whatsoever in funeral insurance. In other words, he completely misjudged his audience as regards his product. And that just made him look like a complete idiot. So we don't want to do that. And that's why we spend energy attempting to put flesh around these bones of our avatar. Some people even give their avatars names because they feel it helps them to talk to that mythical person when they're generating promotional material. All this might seem a little bit strange. As we go through the class, I think you will realize that this is not some kind of strange irrelevance. It's actually a very important part of the process, an important part of the process whereby we manage to get relevant and interesting materials to our potential customers. Okay, so a final little piece before I let you go and start on the exciting process of reading the text and doing the work for the first week. My background was not always in academia. I was an inventor in my late 20s, early 20s and late teens. By the time I was 25, I had over a dozen patents, some of them for quite bizarre things and some of them not so bizarre. And two of them in particular, I did not want to just kind of sit gathering dust. I was unable to get any business interested in licensing them, and so I thought they were too good to waste. So that sent me in the direction of entrepreneurship. And I spent some while building up a business in the medical equipment industry and also in the professional music industry. Medical equipment side of it was around an invention that I had for measuring the output from ultrasound scanning equipment of the sort that is used in extremely sensitive areas, such as when you are scanning an image of the unborn fetus. And at that time, people were a little concerned. They were still a bit shell-shocked from the effects of ionizing radiation, in other words, X-rays, and the dangers that had revealed. So they were concerned about being able to measure the output from ultrasound equipment. Anyway, that's that side of it. The second side of it is a little bit more sexy, and that is I invented a microphone that's used on musical acoustic instruments, and it became pretty famous on the piano. It became one of the the go-to pieces of equipment for recording piano. It was used by many famous pianists and other instruments, people like Frank Sinatra, who wouldn't go on stage without it in the last 2 years of his professional life. The Elton John, the Moody Blues, UB40, many people and organisations, Radio City Music Hall, the Albert Hall, Sydney Opera House. So in the course of all that, and the reason I'm taking you through that, is when you're starting in an entrepreneurial environment, you don't typically have huge resources. So you have to indulge in what is known as guerrilla marketing. And just as guerrilla warfare represents an unusual kind of warfare in the sense that you use tactics rather than huge numbers of soldiers and equipment. And so the same is true of guerrilla marketing, in that there are plenty of sources of free publicity, such as press releases to what was then print media but is now e-zines, electronic magazines. Your local TV station may often be short of a bit of interesting material and may welcome a story about your startup, your product. So there are all sorts of ways of getting free or inexpensive publicity, and using that to begin the process of this conversation that you're going to have with your prospective purchasers. So we'll be covering quite a bit of that guerrilla kind of marketing. Not many of you, I would guess, are going to end up in mainstream marketing organizations. Statistically, it's not terribly likely. So what is more likely is that you will need some sort of marketing skills in perhaps a small company. It might be a small startup you're working with. It might be your own entrepreneurial venture. You might be helping a friend or a spouse or whatever. So that's the more likely possibility for you actually using marketing skills. The other side of this is that even if you're not going to end up in a small organization using your marketing skills, you will need to be using marketing skills at some point. Some of you may be using this in the very near future, next time you go to a job interview. And what you'll basically be doing is marketing yourself. You will be doing what's known as self-branding. Self-branding is not just for sports celebrities or people who are working in Hollywood. It is really for everybody. It is to do with how you present yourself. What do you really want to look at in terms of how people see you, how people perceive you, what skills you wish to put forward, what maybe some emotional intelligence kind of benefits that you want to make sure that they know you have. So there are all sorts of reasons why we brand. We brand organizationally in order to create a coherent image of an organization and the products within it. But also we like to brand, we should be branding ourselves in a very, very similar kind of way. And our products, of course, might well take the form of being our skills. If we are launching our own consultancy, if we're working for ourselves, then we may well be, our products will be those things that we're offering to our customers. So there are all sorts of reasons to understand what branding is, and one of the things that we'll be doing is to look at that as applied to yourselves in the context of a job interview. So we will be having a look at that. Well, I wish you luck with the class, and as ever, I'm easy to contact, and I will respond quickly to any of your questions. If something is not clear, do not hesitate, please, to be in contact. I don't want you to fall behind because something wasn't clear to you or some material was complex. So anyway, good luck and best wishes.